Felsefe Sempozyumunda Lucy Bolton, Profesör Lucy Bolton'u ağırlıyor olacağız, Keynote Speaker'ımız. Öncelikle, Lucy bizi duyabiliyor mu şu anda? Hello Lucy.
Hello, hi everyone.
We're online and we're starting the session right now. First of all, I will introduce you to the audiences. First and foremost, it's a great honor to welcome Professor Lucy Bolton as the keynote speaker of the 8th Symposium on Cinema and Philosophy. It's also personally meaningful for me to have been entrusted with this introduction. Professor Bolton, whose distinguished scholarship has made significant contributions to the field of film philosophy, unfortunately could not be with us in person today due to her demanding schedule. Nevertheless, we are truly grateful that she is able to join us online and enrich our symposium with her invaluable insights. I would like to begin by expressing our sincere thanks to her. Before giving the floor to Professor Bolton, I would like to briefly share her academic biography and provide a short summary in Turkish of the talk she will deliver. Öncelikle ben kendisiyle daha önce yaptığım bir görüşmede antat kaldığım şekilde sizlere Profesör Bolton'un bugün yapacağı sunuşun bir özetini Türkçe olarak aktaracağım. Daha sonra sözü kendisine bırakacağım ama önden bir kısa biyografisini okumak istiyorum. Lucy Bolton, Queen Mary Üniversitesi Londra bünyesinde film felsefesi profesörü olarak görev yapmakta olup araştırma ve eğitim çalışmalarını feminist film felsefesi alanında yürütmektedir. Bolton, Film ve Female Consciousness, Irgai Cinema and Thinking Woman and Contemporary Cinema and the Philosophy of Iris Murdoch adlı eserlerin yazarıdır. Ayrıca Film Philosophy dergisinin editör kurulunda yer almaktadır. Yakın dönemde derlediği The Feminist Film Philosophy Reader adlı çalışma Mayıs 2026'da yayımlanmaya hazırlanmaktadır. Halihazırda Philosophies of Film Stardom başlıklı monografi üzerinde çalışan Bolton, bu eser kapsamında sistematik bir film felsefesi ortaya koymayı amaçlamaktadır. Şimdi izninizle bugün yapacağı sunuşun bir Türkçe özetini de aktarmak istiyorum. Filmin elbise bilinci, sinemada kostümün fenomenolojisi. Lucy Bolton, Queen Mary University London'da film felsefesi profesörüdür. Bu bildiride kıyafetlere ilişkin Virginia Woolf'un düşüncelerinden Lucy Irigaray'ın örtü kavramına yönelik felsefi eleştirisinden ve çeşitli filmlerden alınan dikkat çekici örneklerden yararlanarak sinema kostümünü fenomenoloji temelli bir bakışla kavramayı önerecektir. Virginia Woolf, kıyafetlerin benlik algımız üzerindeki önemini derinlemesine kavramış bir yazardır. Orlando'da şöyle yazar: onlar, yani kıyafetler, dünyanın bize bakışını ve bizim dünyaya bakışımızı değiştirir. Woolf, bu farkındalığı, bedenleşmiş algı alanını günlüklerinde kıyafetle düşünme bilinci, Frog Consciousness olarak adlandırır. Woolf'a göre insanlar kıyafetlerle kendilerini dışarıdakilerden, örneğin benden, koruyan ve onlarla bağlantı kuran bir zar salgılarlar. Moda araştırmacısı Liza Cohen, kıyafetle düşünme bilincini giyinik olma hali ve eylemi olarak tanımlamıştır. Ancak bu kavram, sinemasal kostümünü oluşturduğu zar ile olan ilişkisi ve ön yansıtımsal, algısal deneyim bağlamında ele alındığında genişler ve derinleşir. Film fenomenolojisi, sinema deneyimini merkeze alır, filmin deneyimi nasıl uyarlandırıldığını ve bizim filmi zihinlerimizde ve bedenlerimizde nasıl deneyimlediğimizi tartışır. Bu bağlamda sinemaya özgü bir elbiseyle düşünme bilinci olduğunu ileri sürmektedir. Karakter, duygu, anlatısal anlam ve hatta etik değerlendirme ile ilişkilendirilen film kostümünün anlamını seyircinin kavramasını mümkün kılan fenomenolojik bir karşılaşma alanı oluşmaktadır. Dahası bu frog consciousness kavramı sinema salonunun dışındaki anılarımıza ve yaşantılarımıza da uzanmaktadır. Bu bildiri filmin elbise bilincinin nasıl işlediğini açıklayacak ve onun yoğunluğunu, etkileyici gücünü anlamaya yönelik bir çözümleme sunacaktır diye sözlerimi noktalıyorum. Okay, Professor Balton, I would like to leave the stage floor for you.
Thank you very much, Eda. I'll share my slides in a second. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
I see some nods as well. It's very nice to be able to see people. Thank you for coming. First of all, thank you, Eda. Thank you for your help in setting this all up. And thank you to the committee for inviting me to be a keynote speaker at this year's symposium, the 8th International Cine Philosophy Symposium. I'd like to congratulate the organisers on a fabulous programme and thank the whole organisation for your ongoing work, journal and commitment to the project of film philosophy. It really matters, I think, and your work is of great value to the international film philosophy community, so thank you very much. I'd like to now share my slides. I hope that they're... Eda, is that okay? Can you see them okay?
Yes, we can see it properly.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in this paper I would propose an approach to film costume, which is grounded in phenomenology and thinks of costume as a costume being. This is a project I've been thinking about and drawing together for several years, many years actually. And it brings together many areas of interest to me in ways that feel authentic and full of possibility. This is the first time I've formally presented my thinking on film's frock consciousness, and I'm excited to do so. I should say at the outset that the word frock, you may be familiar with it, you may not. Frock is an English, quite an old-fashioned English word for a dress. So frock consciousness is consciousness of dress. The touchstones for this framework come from various directions: film costume, fashion, dressmaking and exhibitions, Virginia Woolf, her fiction, her non-fiction and her diary, Luce Irigaray and her thought on the envelope, and the other arts, notably specific instances of painting and literature. Between these inspirations, I am drawing connections and mapping out a phenomenological understanding of the life and the afterlife of a film costume being. And this is what I'm going to set out for you today. Film phenomenology, as we know, is concerned with the experience of film, both how it evokes experience and how we experience film in our minds and in our bodies. I propose that there is a phenomenological meeting space, a realm, which enables filmgoers to understand the meaning of film costume in relation to character, emotion, narrative meaning, and even moral judgment, and that this frock consciousness, using Woolf's term, extends into our memories and experiences outside of the cinema. So this paper will explain and demonstrate how film's frock consciousness works and attempt to account for its intensity and power. I'm going to begin by showing a wonderful clip from the film LA Confidential as a touchstone for the rest of my paper.
You guys better be here.
Hi, Nick. I need a delivery. The KC Joe Gin Rum Scotch.
That sounds like a hell of a party, Lynn. I'll be right with you.
Here will be green and bright, sun to shine by day, all the stars at night. Is the wild way to say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, officer. Practically stamped on your forehead.
There you go, wife. Guys better beat.
This short scene is really useful for us today because it does many things. It introduces the character Lynn, the Veronica Lake lookalike played by Kim Basinger, and it does so by presenting her as an unknown quantity. Her black hooded cloak in heavy, rich fabric and black gloves seemingly cover her entirely, and yet her voice and her words and her stance invite the attention of Bud, played by Russell Crowe, and us. Our attention is perhaps piqued by the touches of ivory satin on the cloak's edges. We are intrigued to see what is behind the black garb, but we also see how Bud is intrigued, and we are aware that Lynn dresses in a strikingly glamorous and sumptuous fashion. We see her matte, powdered white nose first, then as she turns to the camera, her whole gleaming face, now surrounded by the white halo that lines the hood. Lynn is presented to us as a luminous spectacle of 1940s Hollywood beauty, slightly incongruous in a 1950s liquor store, and we are both struck by that spectacle and aware of the effect on Bud White. So this moment is a revelation of Lynn, through performance, yes, and all the elements of scene construction, blocking, mise en scène, editing, but costume is vital and integral. Analysis of costume was an important part of my first book, Film and Female Consciousness, even though I didn't really realise it at the time. In a way that costume builds character and speaks for character, reflecting on sexuality, masquerade and subjectivity. I found that a particular and specific description of a pair of unflattering sandals for Franny and In the Cut, a woolly hat for Morven in Morven Colour, and sitting around in knickers all day for Charlotte in Lost in Translation, all really mattered to the understanding of the characters in the films I was writing about, especially when these characters did not speak very much. The costumes gave us information about these women. So since then, I've had thought in far more depth about film costumes, and now I want to outline the various approaches that we can take to studying and analysing film costume usefully at the moment. Firstly, through the perspective of fashion. This is a well-established academic discipline. I suggest Rebecca Arnold's small book as an introduction if you're interested, but with leading work in the field of film and fashion by scholars such as Pamela Church-Gibson, Stella Brizzi and Rachel Mosley. These scholars examine film and fashion in relation to social significance concerning gender, race and class, age and ableism, and also the interconnectedness of fashion with other discourses and disciplines such as history, materiality, celebrity and stardom. Pamela Church-Gibson's brilliant book on fashion and celebrity culture explains the highly complex and constantly developing relationships in contemporary society between celebrities, designers, social media, screen media and advertising. Now, most costume designers will tell you that their work has nothing to do with fashion and is all to do with character. But as we analyse their work and the impact of their designs in many aspects, we can see the interrelationships that exist and develop. So, next to think about is the work of the costume designer. The approach to studying a costume designer draws on the skills involved in costume making, the conception of how to tell a story and create a character through costume, and the complex demands of the profession itself. Also, the historical account of who has done what in the industry, which often is a matter of drawing the hidden or unacknowledged work of women into the foreground and acknowledging the extent of their contribution to film meaning. With the recognition of designers such as Sandy Powell on the right and Jenny Bevan on the left, the work of British costume designers has become far more high profile in the UK in recent years. And here's Sandy Powell is everywhere at the moment since she got a BAFTA, British Association of Film and Television Awards, BAFTA Life Fellowship and a BFI Life Fellowship. She's everywhere. There are several film studies discipline approaches to studying costume, and one of the most interesting is through stardom and star studies. The relationship between stardom and fashion is particularly interesting, I suggest, because it makes the difference between costume and fashion far more fluid. Joan Crawford, for example, in Classical Hollywood Days, would only wear clothes designed by the designer Adrian, both on and off screen. He was credited with creating her square-shouldered suits in order to deal with what he called her Johnny Weissmuller shoulders. Johnny Weissmuller was the actor who played Tarzan, and with softening her athletic physique. The legendary relationship between costume designer Travis Banton and stars Marlene Dietrich, Carole Lombard and Mae West shows how his designs were absolutely integral to the creation of their star images. Audrey Hepburn had a decades-long relationship with Hubert de Givenchy, where he designed costumes for her on-screen characters and off-screen special occasions, including her Oscar-winning dress and her wedding dress. Hepburn is one of those stars who becomes a fashion icon through their on and off-screen outfits. Think also of Julie Christie, symbolising swinging London and Britain in the 1960s, Diane Keaton, a lifelong style maven recently sadly lost. But in Sabrina, Audrey Hepburn has a classic Hollywood makeover moment when she arrives home from Paris, no longer the gauche chauffeur's daughter, but now a fashionable European beauty. This makeover moment, as well as relating to Sabrina the character, also confirmed Audrey Hepburn's transnational star image following her debut in Rome and Holiday, and consolidated her association, her lifelong association, with European chic. Stars are also often described as embodying cultural moments through costume, where the mixture of a garment, star, story and society come together to mark a shift, such as when Clark Gable revealed he didn't wear a vest under his shirt in It Happened One Night. This was revolutionary, apparently. Marlon Brando's sweaty t-shirt and jeans showing the working class on screen for one of the first times in America in A Streetcar Named Desire. James Dean's red bomber jacket introducing the teenager in Rebel Without a Cause. Julie Christie embodying or personifying really the new independent woman in the 1960s. And as you said, Diane Keaton breaking the boundaries of gender dressing in the 1970s. Stardom, as we know, has always had a diverse presence in culture, and star style has only become more ubiquitous. A comment by Pamela Church-Gibson here is, I think, particularly instructive, particularly when thinking about this incredibly popular screen costume, the green dress, worn by Keira Knightley in the film Atonement. Pamela Church-Gibson says, and these quotes are on the handout that you should have, hopefully, "Film and fashion segue seamlessly into one another. Knightley as herself and as the heroine of Atonement are indistinguishable." We might take issue with Pamela on that. But, while her face is also the face of Chanel. She might be seen, say, on a magazine's cover, then appear within its pages in a still from her latest film, or in a paparazzi shot, and finally could even bookend the magazine, appearing half naked on the back cover to advertise Coco Mademoiselle. So Pamela Church Gibson considers this blurring of boundaries to be damaging to cinema as a formal medium. I can see some force in that position, which is why I think it is so important for film and film philosophers to focus on the specific meaning of film costume, aside from star fashion or simply the garment itself as a transferable look. There are some films where costumes are dominant and may become a film wardrobe that takes on a life of its own. Several of Edith Head's designs for Hitchcock films are like this. And I have another suggestion of a film that I've written about elsewhere, Bell, Book and Candle, with Kim Novak from 1958. Here, Novak's costumes are designed by Jean-Louis, and she plays a modern-day witch in Manhattan, and her fashions mark her out as a beatnik, essentially. Luxurious fabrics, low backs, touches of fur. She is unconventional in her colours and fabrics. This wardrobe for this film has quite a following and online influence. It has websites devoted to it, which is fascinating, I think. I would also suggest that René Rousseau's wardrobe in the Thomas Crown Affair by Celine, this became like a fashion moment. But the appeal of these wardrobes, these fashionable film wardrobes, lies in the ways in which they add to the character. They tell us about the character. The beatnik witch in Manhattan, a highly stylish and incredibly polished professional in Thomas Crown Affair. It's unlikely, I suggest, that a hit wardrobe can be created if it is too imposed or contrived. I remember reading a pre-release article in British Elle magazine about the film Great Expectations. There's a shot here on the left from it, directed by Alfonso Cuarón from 1988, which described this moment of Gwyneth Paltrow running down a New York street in the rain, wearing a particular Donna Karan dress, and it was described as surely destined to become an iconic fashion moment. Well, very few people have seen that film, and nobody remembers this moment or this dress, other than the dress became far more widely known, worn by Demi Moore on the right here, in a very widely publicised advertising campaign by Donna Karan with a blonde Bruce Willis in the advertising campaign. So it's a very interesting star text. They tried to force this into an iconic moment. It didn't work. There are, of course, many films where costumes are one of the main elements of the film's style. Sandy Powell's design for The Favourite, Ruth E. Carter's designs for Black Panther, Mileno Canonero's designs for Marie Antoinette. The emphasis here, however, is on the costume designer's contribution to the film's visual style. This may be anachronistic, as in with Marie Antoinette. It may be recuperative, as in Black Panther, an exaggerated homage or a faithful recreation. But the style is exact and precisely crafted for the film. It is not the insertion of a particular fashion designer's style. We can think about films where there is a dominance of a designer in the look of the whole film. Sometimes a designer with a very strong style dominates a film in a distracting way. In Audrey Hepburn's film How to Steal a Million, Givenchy's designs announce themselves as attention-grabbing high fashion. Arguably, we pay much more attention to the outfit than the character or the story. See also Giorgio Armani and the Untouchables, a uniform style of suits and masculine daywear, each garment looking like it was being worn for the first time. I remember this striking me when I saw the film in the cinema in 1987. Famously, Robert De Niro, in the middle of the shot on the left, playing Al Capone, refused to wear an Armani-designed suit and insisted upon getting a suit and silk underclothes from the outfitters that Al Capone himself used. This is an insight into the role of the costume in the performance of a character. More about this later, and also the fascinating status of memorabilia, costume memorabilia. Here we have the handkerchief worn by Robert De Niro as Al Pacino up for auction. I don't know how much it raised. By some degree of contrast, in American Gigolo, Giorgio Armani's outfits for Richard Gere were a major injection of designer influence into mainstream cinema as an art form. This scene is vital to the mood and atmosphere of the film. It tells us about the character's lifestyle, his values, and consumerism, how much money he earns as a gigolo, what he spends it on, and the importance of clothes to his line of work. So let's enjoy this beautiful clip from American Gigolo. There is a quote from Helena Bonham Carter about these costumes from when she played Lucy Honeychurch in A Room with a View, the Merchant Ivory film. Helena Bonham Carter says, "We entered Cosprop as ourselves and we walked out as the person we were playing." This idea of transformation is echoed through many quotes, throughout the book, through many quotes, and the exhibition. And it conveys the magnitude of the role of the costume designer and the costume in the understanding, construction, and inhabiting of the characters that they are to play. This merits far more attention than I'm able to give it today, but I cite it as a highly relevant element that we need to keep in mind when considering the phenomenology of the film costume. Before moving on to my main proposal, the development of film's frock consciousness, I want to highlight the way, fascinating way I think, in which a single item of clothing, or even an accessory, can play a significantly meaningful role in the performance of a character and the meaning of a scene or a film more broadly. In my chapter on Tippi Hedren's shoes for the book Shoe Reels, I examine a very precise and sharply focused relationship between costume, character, and stardom. I discuss the ways in which Hedren's confident walk and the wobble of the heel of her shoe suggest strength and vulnerability in both her films for Hitchcock. In The Birds, there is a focus on her shoes in order to emphasise how capable she is, driving her car, operating a motorboat, climbing in and out of said boat. And the use of her shoes in Marnie stands in for dialogue when she has to be covert and quiet. There's a marvellous scene, I'm sure you know it, on the left here, where Marnie robs a safe and puts her shoes in her coat pockets so she can tiptoe across the floor. We can see that one of her shoes is making its way out of her pocket as she tiptoes, but she is shocked when the shoe falls and bangs to the floor, giving away her criminality. This is a classic Hitchcockian suspense scene, and the focus of it is the shoe. She also uses the toe point of her shoe to dispose of a key down a grating, thereby disposing of her previous identity. And she is seen from behind, walking along a station platform, again emphasising that determined Hedren walk on a wobbly shoe heel. The wobble is integral to the way in which Hedren's characters are broken down in both films. Another single item we might think about here is the glove from the famous scene between Marlon Brando and Eva Marie Saint in On the Waterfront. as this young couple hedge around each other shyly, realising their affection for each other, virginal Edie drops one of her white gloves. And Terry, played by Marlon Brando, not only picks the glove up, but he inserts his hand into it, stretching the white fabric over all his fingers. And he keeps hold of it, acting as if nothing has happened, thereby invading her property, invading her territory, keeping her and our attention and preventing her from leaving him. It's a very powerful glove. So, this has been an overview of some approaches to film costume that are currently some of the more popular ways and the way in which I've been using them. And this summary has prepared the ground for my next step. I propose that there is more to costume than all of these approaches, indeed than all of these approaches put together. There is something ineffable about the experience of costume, both on the screen and in an exhibition. By ineffable, I mean something that is generally not put into words as part of the film experience, not defined when we see a costume on screen, or explained when we see one in an exhibition or in a museum or a collection. And yet the meanings of these costumes are deeply felt, known, remembered and recalled, and I suggest become part of us in what Jackie Stacey called active identification through consumerism, eroticization and idealization. This relationship between image and self, the garment, the wearer, the viewer, the conjurer, is a profoundly phenomenological one and calls for description and understanding in that light. Film phenomenology, as we know, as I said, is concerned with the experience of film, and an element of the phenomenological tradition that helps us, particularly when thinking about film costume, is that attention is embodied. Attention is creative and felt, not something passive that we just receive. This acknowledgement of the active phenomenological realm where film costume exists is vital, I argue, to the understanding of how film costume operates. In her accessible and entertaining book, At the Existentialist Cafe, Sarah Bakewell explains phenomenology by describing a cup of coffee, hence this tantalising cup of coffee I have here. Bakewell makes clear that for a phenomenologist, the coffee should not be described in terms of its chemistry or the botany of the coffee plant or how the beans are grown or exported or ground, nothing about this. Nor should there be a sentimental Proustian recollection. It shouldn't be sentimental or personal to me. Instead, it is this, she says. A phenomenological description of the coffee is this. A rich aroma, at once earthy and perfumed, it is the lazy movement of a curlicue of steam rising from its surface. As I lift it to my lips, it is a placidly shifting liquid, and weight inside my hand, inside its thick-rimmed cup. It is an approaching warmth, then an intense dark flavour on my tongue, starting with a slightly austere jolt, and then relaxing into a comforting warmth which spreads from the cup into my body, bringing the promise of lasting alertness and refreshment. The promise, the anticipated sensations, the smell, the colour, and the flavour are all part of the coffee as phenomenon. They all emerge by being experienced. Again, those quotes are on the handout on the sheet. This really useful, clear explanation of the elements of describing phenomena is what Frock consciousness demands. Description of experience, suspension of judgment, and freedom to treat the costume as a serious subject of consideration. It is a formal mode of access to human experience, using method and rigour. The rigour lies in the fact that we can't just say it's a pretty dress, or it looks like a Chanel dress, or it reminds me of my mother's dress. No, we need to bring the elements of its subjective experience alive. These elements, Husserlian in origin, help us with the basic concepts of a phenomenological approach to things in the world. And in relation to clothing in particular, I'm turning first of all to the perennially generative work of Virginia Woolf. In Woolf's short story, The New Dress, she describes how a young woman, Mabel, feels about herself and the world when she wears her new yellow dress. Mabel's self-confidence was completely destroyed, Woolf writes, the moment she came into Mrs. Dalloway's drawing room, as in the moment she entered a party. Her confidence had been high when she was with the dressmaker, discussing it and looking at herself in the mirror. There, Woolf says, she had felt extraordinary bliss when her dress was finished and when she was wearing it. She's described as feeling suffused with light, springing into existence. But now, at the party, she feels idiotically old-fashioned, and she describes how she feels like a crawling fly compared to the other guests who are beautiful insects. Woolf understood the significance of clothes to our sense of self. In Orlando, her novel, she writes, clothes change, they change our view of the world and the world's view of us. This awareness, this realm of perception, Woolf referred to in her diaries as frock consciousness. Woolf describes how with clothes, people secrete an envelope, build an envelope around them, which connects them and protects them from others, like myself, who am outside of the envelope. This concept of the envelope resonates with Luce Irigaray's discussion of the metaphor of the envelope in binary gender terms. For Irigaray, the envelope is identity construction, and whereas in Irigaray's writing, man receives his envelope from women as son, lover, husband, woman has no envelope other than that which is constructed by masculine discourse in patriarchy. It is a negative concept for women. The envelope conceals and limits women in accordance to a masculine-dominated imaginary. Irigaray uses the idea of an unbroken hymen as indicative of the value of a woman's virginity, or the vagina as a receptacle for semen, or the womb as a place to nurture the fetus, all envelopes. But in an ethics of sexual difference, she also envisages the envelope as a protective, self-created home for a woman to inhabit. She describes it as a possible place for herself, to be inside herself. I see the idea of the envelope as a constructed place, being addressed by Woolf's conception of it as connecting and protecting ourselves in relation to other people. And this is a useful development of Irigaray's gender-based analysis. A Woolfian conception of the envelope of frock consciousness does not run along two separate gender lines dictated by this binary difference. Rather, it is based in creation of character and perception of ourselves and of others. Now, of course, our self-perceptions and the styles used to create the perception of characters on screen will certainly be influenced by prescriptive social norms. But these envelopes of frock consciousness that are film costumes begin from a place of character construction, which ought to be able to free us from ideology. The meaning of the costume itself is what matters here, and the phenomenological being of the costume is what matters. Let us call it the costume being, created by a costume designer and embodied and inhabited by a performer as a character. Fashion scholar Lisa Cohen defined frock consciousness as the state and activity of being clothed. But the concept is so greatly expanded and enriched when we view it in relation to the envelope of the cinema costume and all the meanings that it can contain. Woolf also understood the phenomenological power of the cinema. In her 1923 essay, she described how, when watching film, the eye and the brain together understand that the images, as she says, on film, have taken on a quality which does not belong to the simple photograph of real life. She notes how cinema is dealing with a residue of visual emotion, which she describes as being of no use to either painter or poet, something abstract which moves with a controlled and conscious art, something which calls for the very slightest help from words or music to make itself intelligible, yet justly uses them subserviently. Woolf describes cinema as an art form that has been born fully clothed. She actually uses that phrase. And she means that film has it has all the other art forms and technologies at its disposal. So it has to work out what it can do with its abilities, rather than to work out what its abilities are. Woolf is describing here, in prescient film phenomenological terms, how a film can show us images in a particularly meaningful way, through the representation of ideas, of concepts, and of thoughts. She famously writes in the same essay about a black blob moving across the screen as she watched The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where she realised, she says, that she was looking at fear itself, not the statement, "I am afraid." So she's getting right at the heart of the idea that film shows us, doesn't tell us. If we bring together Woolf's thinking about the phenomenological power of cinema and her description of the complex feelings evoked by the clothes that we and others wear, we can begin to see how a frock consciousness of film might enable us to more accurately and exactly describe the operations and evocations of the film costume being. Building on some of these ideas from Woolf just mentioned, how might we bring them into the realm of frock consciousness we thought about in relation to the clip from LA Confidential? We considered the appearance and materiality of Lynn's costume in detail earlier. What does the costume invite us to think about? How does it create a realm of frock consciousness? The woman is entering the shop to buy alcohol for a party. She chose to dress herself like this, glamorously shrouded with accents of ivory silk. It makes us ask how she felt when she dressed herself, what she was dressing for, and what set of impressions she intended to make. She enters the shop with confidence, has a smart verbal exchange with the cop, and shares her gentle amusement at his lack of subtlety with the shop owner. What are we invited to think about? What is under the hood, under the cloak, under the gloves? We and Bud can only see a glimpse. Her clothes under the cloak are not intended to be seen by us. But we wonder what she is wearing under her outerwear. She is dressed for somewhere and someone else, not here. So what is she saving herself for? Where is she going? We are also witness to the spellbinding effect she has on Bud. So I suggest we also feel slightly dumbstruck by this vision. We are therefore enticed and tempted by what we can't see, and then also awed by what we are shown. Her envelope, then, in Woolf's words, is a powerful one, which is both attractive and protective. In fact, in Woolf's short story about Mabel's new dress, Mabel's problems at the party start when she removes her cloak, and at the end she cannot wait to cover herself with the cloak again. One of the most powerful elements in this clip is that we cannot see Lynn's body. In order to think about embodiment of costume, I would like to turn to a series of paintings by the artist Kathy Lomax, titled "I'm a Girl, Not a Ghoul." These paintings evoke the body of Marilyn Monroe in white dresses that she wears in her films. These paintings show Monroe's fleshed out or embodied dresses without showing her flesh or her body. This fascinating idea goes right to the heart of the relationship between garment and body. In the Hollywood Costume Exhibition in 2012 in London at the Victoria and Albert Museum, there were many, many beautifully displayed costumes. It really raised the bar in how to display costumes meaningfully. But one display struck me particularly. This is the costume worn by Kim Novak as Judy in Vertigo, the green jumper and skirt. Here it is as it was displayed. I learnt a lot from seeing this costume on display. I had not realised it was a jumper or sweater and a skirt made of separate fabrics. I had not realised that there was a brooch at her neck in the shape of a rabbit. But my overall impression was how much less interesting and meaningful the outfit looked on a mannequin. It was Kim Novak's curvaceous, sinewy and sensuous body and movement that inhabited this skirt and jumper and made it a clingy, undulating, sexy outfit that showed off Judy's body in a more obvious way than Novak dressed as Madeline ever did. In the film, the costume showed us colour, class, sex, and provocation. On the mannequin, it provided new knowledge and proximity, as well as a connection with my memories and my opinions. But the costume itself can't be stretched over a mannequin in the way it was stretched over Novak's body. It can't perform in motion. Kathy Lomax's paintings offer a unique perspective on this dynamic relationship. The white dress paintings portray inhabited dresses. The dresses themselves are shown as they look in their film performance. Not just costumes on a star, but performing characters who we recognise. This outlook enables a language which calls attention to the independence of the costume in the formation of a film's visual style, and in our retention of the image of the film in action. We can recognise all the characters from the Girl Not a Ghoul paintings due to the combination of dress and dress in action. As Kathy Lomax, the artist, describes herself, wiggling flesh rendered in fabric, stilled and captured in oily, viscous paint. Amazing work. Finally, I want to draw on a short story by Rose Tremaine called Juliette Greco's Black Dress, where a young English girl on a coming-of-age trip to Paris falls in love with a black dress that evokes the aura and character of Juliette Greco. The girl, we're told, adored the sight of herself so much that she couldn't bear to take off the dress. The girl then layers on black eyeliner and walks around the streets of Paris feeling that everybody is staring at her, and she keeps wondering whether they are stares of admiration or because she's wearing a cocktail dress in the middle of winter. She has a romance with her art teacher and feels like his muse. She gazes at her black dress over the back of a chair in her lover's room, which smells of the artist's paint and turpentine. And she thinks to herself, we're told, at that moment, the whole world became titchy and reduced itself to an attic and a slanty bit of Paris sky. And she thought, right, this is where I'm going to stay forever. The imaginative power of a dress, the effectiveness of the imagination, the extent of the meaning of a person's self-image and the perception of them by others. I want to show a very quick clip to convey the aura of Juliette Greco so that we can share the frock consciousness of young Julie in the story, feeling her newfound sensuality and muse-like status in her black outfit.
Bien que la vie est cruelle, aux musiciens des ruelles, son copain, son compagnon, c'est l'accordéon qui s'est dit qu'il est lui, à s'asseoir pour qu'il le chante. C'est vous, c'est moi, mais c'est accordéon. Accordéa, accordéa, accordéon. Do mona, l'accordéa, accordéon.
Right, I can stop there. So Greco is a mood. Yes, Juliet Greco is a mood. Her voice, her look, her time and place. And through the black dress in Paris, Julie, the character's frock consciousness, aligns her with the romance and seductiveness of her inspiration, her muse, Greco. We find out unceremoniously in the short story that the dress got torn and he dumped her. She went back to England and put the torn black dress in a drawer and sometimes looked at it or held it to her face to breathe in the old scent of turpentine. It's very moving, I think. I refer to this tale because it conveys so beautifully the idea that costume can transport us, can enable us to create an imaginary identity, can be the notion that embodies desire, performance, masquerade, or a temporary persona, the construction of a character who we might want to play. I see this as informing our understanding of how a film costume conjures up a character, from conception, creation, construction, performance, an afterlife in a museum or collection, and lodged in our memories as frock consciousness that we share with the designer, actor, character, and curator. This sharing of meanings and potential meanings and understandings of a garment, and how that garment holds and transforms meanings in an envelope, is the realm of film's frock consciousness. And in order to make the most of this realm, we need to attend to the experience of the costume, describe it as phenomena, and thereby understand the costume being at every stage of its life. In conclusion, I'd like to just end on a couple of further thoughts about the afterlife of film costume and its ongoing participation in the envelope of a garment's frock consciousness. We need to turn our attention to how the garment exists after the costume being exists after the film shoot is over. What are its afterlives and associated phenomenological encounters in the museum, private collection, exhibition, or costume house? I've briefly mentioned some of the questions raised by costumes exhibited in museums, and I'd love to talk more about this if you want to. But two encounters with costume that I would like to share with you, just as final things to think about. I think that they're of value to this conversation. Firstly, this year, I had the pleasure of seeing some original costumes from classical Hollywood films at the home of a collector in Los Angeles. I held these heavy beaded garments that I recognised from some of the most famous films from Hollywood in the 1930s and 40s. And he keeps them next to photographs of them in storage and on the performer. And I did not fully understand what I was experiencing, the relationship to the photographs and the stills alongside them. I saw this famous dress from the 1930s black and white film A Princess Comes Across, worn by Carole Lombard, that I always assumed was a silver dress. You can see the pictures in the bottom left there. It looks silver or pearly. It was actually this kind of dark peach, and so heavy. It represented a challenge to me to understand my experience of this garment, and it is something that will take some phenomenological descriptive writing, I'm sure. But I raise this as a very specific and rare direct physical encounter with a garment itself, and the need I feel to explore this experience of the costume being. Costume not only makes meaning on screen, but also carries meaning in its stretches and its stains, giving visible form to a film performance. It gives a measure of tangibility to the intangibility of the screen vision. And finally, I have this extraordinary little bit of fan merchandise. Here it is. supposedly an authenticated piece of fabric from a yellow dress worn by Ava Gardner. It was a gift to me. It has a certificate of authenticity, but it seems to me to strike at the heart of fan gullibility. Maybe I am conscious of more than a touch of the fan about my attitude towards film costume, and the possibility that this piece of memorabilia is fake, perhaps akin to a second-class relic of a saint, another industry peddling in the willful delusion of devotees. This sends me to study the provenance with scepticism and to try to identify the dress from which this little piece of fabric supposedly comes. Thank you for inviting me to share my thinking about this often overlooked and yet hugely influential and memorable element of cinema's visual style. I believe the possibilities for thinking about film's frock consciousness are considerable, and I hope I have stimulated you to think anew perhaps about film costume beings that may be part of your own identity envelopes. Thank you very much.
Lucy, thank you very much for your precious presentation. It's actually a very unique topic, and it's worth to discuss. And it was very inspiring to listen about your research on this subject. And if you don't mind, I will just make a small summary, very brief summary, actually, in Turkish.
Okay, yes, may I say also though, that if people would like, I appreciate it must be difficult to follow somewhat, if people would like to read my paper, I'm very happy to send it to people if they want to email me.
Okay, then I will also announce this in Turkish. Eğer bir 3 sayfalık brief information içeren İngilizce-Türkçe karışık oldu. 3 sayfalık bir özet metni var. Bu özet metni ilgilenenlere gönderebilirim der. Eğer böyle bir arzunuz olursa bizimle irtibata geçmeniz yeterli olacaktır. Okay, Lucy, we will make the connection for this paper delivery. So if probably if somebody asks for further information, I guess I have the papers, right? You have already sent them to me.
Yes, but I could edit and save the talk in a more suitable way to send.
Okay, we would love that. So you can send it to me, then I will make the connection for the ones who are asking for it. Okay, right now I'll just briefly also give the brief information about your talk in Turkish right now, and then I will turn to the audiences whether if they have questions to you. Lucy Balton konuşmasının özetinde sinema kostümünü anlamak için fenomenoloji temelli bir yaklaşım önerdiğini belirtti. Virginia Woolf'un kıyafetle düşünme bilinci kavramından ve Lucy Irigaray'ın örtü eleştirisinden yola çıkarak kıyafetlerin hem benlik algımızı hem de dünya ile ilişkimizi şekillendirdiğini vurguladı. Konuşmasında Balton, sinemaya özgü bir elbiseyle düşünme bilincinin var olduğunu, seyircinin film kostümleriyle kurduğu bu duysal ve ön yansıtımsal karşılaşmanın karakter, duygu ve anlatı anlamını kavramada belirleyici bir rol oynadığını da özetle ekledi. Bu kostümsel bilincin yalnızca film anında değil, salonun dışındaki anılarımıza ve yaşantılarımıza da yayıldığını ifade ederek sunumunun sinema kostümünün yoğunluğunu ve etkileyici gücünü çözümlediğine vurgu yaptı. Şeklinde özetleyebiliriz ve ayrıca bu kostüm tasarımının sinemada nasıl bir anlatıya dönüştüğünü, anlatıyı nasıl dönüştürebildiğini ve etkilediğini de konuşması arasında çokça verdiği imajlarla hareketli ve sabit imajlarla bir kere daha bize açıkladı. Şimdi soru cevaba geçebiliriz. Sorusu olan varsa iletebiliriz Lucy'ye. Lucy, I'll ask the audiences whether if they have questions to you. Okay, I guess we have a question.
Çalışıyor mu? Yeah. I think it's working. Hi, Professor Bolton. I think it's a great presentation. Thank you so much, and it's really inspiring. My question is a little bit short one, and closely related to your topic and your presentation. According to your idea, in what ways can film costumes act as a form of resistance or challenge the power and identity on screen? If you want, I can repeat the question. In what way?
Resistance. In which ways can film costumes act as resistance?
Yep. And challenge the power and identity for the cinema, for the screen. This is the question, actually. Is it possible to answer for this?
Yes, certainly. Could you just say what identity you used? Was it political or?
It can be, yep. Political identity. Maybe it can be about gender. But indeed, in your presentation, you focus upon the gender, but we do not have chance to focus upon political identity, I think. Yes. So maybe we can get the political approach from you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's an important point, because one of the, I don't know if you know this book by Sarah Bakewell about existentialism. It's a really enjoyable read. She makes it, it's a very narrativized engagement with existentialism. But one of the points that she makes is that phenomenological description, getting to the nature of the thing itself, to an extent frees you from the sort of constrictions of ideology. So you can, because my point about fraught consciousness is it comes from many angles. You know, it's a realm. So as an analyst, you can describe what's going on closely and carefully in relation to the evidence of ideologies, of political structures, of gender norms, of ageism, of ableism, all these areas. But you can also see it as very much so the work of a costume designer creating a costume being that challenges what we might expect. So, for example, in both a design way and a political way. So a film like The Favourite, the designer Sandy Powell made film costumes that were anachronistic. They were not historically accurate, but they made a point about a slightly surreal, exaggerated look that the film had. In terms of gender, certainly, you could make not just a look like Diane Keaton that I mentioned, but you could make clothes, for example, the costumes worn by the crew of the Nostromo in Alien. They alongside in Ridley Scott's Alien, the costumes alongside the names, which are all gender neutral, and the costumes are gender neutral, they erase the usual evidence of gender in a film cast, highlighting therefore the differences that we spot between, say, Ripley and Lambert and Parker and Dallas. So it can both throw into sharp relief gender differences, it can disguise them. I mean, I really think it can do all these things. Our task is to pay attention to it and to describe it and understand how it's working. Does that help? Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
I think we don't have more questions, and I would like to thank you once again joining us. And it was really as an honor. I was really honored to be your moderator as an academician. It's very valuable for me. Thank you for all your contribution to the symposium. I think we will finish the session right now, but
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eda. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope we can work together in the future. And thank you, everybody, for indulging me and enabling me to think through something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And if anybody does want to contact me, please do. Please email me and I can share any thoughts or any work, or if you want to talk about any work that you're doing, I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Now we will cut the connection.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
conference.
Thank you. Bye. Evet, oturumumuzu sonlandırıyoruz. Teşekkür ederiz.